All right, good morning, everybody. Hopefully, everyone's fit and healthy and looking forward to this today. My name is Paul, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the highlights of exploded views in BricsCAD. If you have any questions, you can use the chats for the questions. Also, don't worry if you don't think of a question, but you do later on, just drop us an email, and happy to answer any questions that you got. And obviously, I'll do some screen videos if you need that as well. So exploded views, a few things to look at here. I've got a simple assembly on the screen at the moment. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. Obviously either shout out or use the chat if you can't see anything. But what we've got here is an assembly with some components and a sub-assembly built in. I'm just going to show you how we can explode this in different ways of doing it. So with the view I've got on the screen, I'm just going to go to the assembly tab and click on the explode icon. This will come up with quite a few options that we can look at. So we've got table by types, which is going to basically group components together. So all of your bolts, all of your washers, all of your plates are all going to be aligned, and I'll show you all of these individually shortly. You've got a linear explosion, so you can choose X, Y, or Z axes and then put in your own distance for exploding out. You've got a fully automatic explosion method. So if you select this, BricsCAD will look at the constraints that have been used on the components and then try to explode along those constraint axes. You've got manual, so you can just move any component in any direction and as many components as you wish. And again, we'll be going through all of these individually soon. You can then do an update if you want to make modifications, and an all-important area, which is the settings. So the first thing I want to do is go to the settings, just to show you what's here. A few things are quite important. The explosion level, so we've got top and bottom. If you use top level, it's literally going to be the top level of the assembly, so sub-assemblies won't be exploded. If you choose bottom, it's going to explode all of the components, even in the sub-assemblies that you've got in the assembly. You can set the name of the explosion, so you can have electrical components, mechanical components, whatever you may choose on each of the views, because you can have multiple exploded views, which we'll be doing also later on. And we can also set the mode. Now, start with this one, set mode, because one that's quite important. You can obviously exclude components and manually select what you want to exclude. You can make extras transparent, and the leaf parts is the components that aren't mechanical components. They're just extrusions and solids that you put into there, so you can tell it to ignore those or make them transparent. Interesting one though is the ignore bomb status. If you've got an assembly here, you may have a component here that is only needed in the model. You don't want it to be shown on the bill of materials, and you can set the bomb status to be invisible in the main assembly. You may want that to be shown though on the exploded view. So what we can do is tell it to ignore that bomb status, so it actually shows the component that would normally be switched off because you're not showing that in the bill of materials. So that's one interesting ones there. So we can go back here. So the first thing I want to do is we're just going to go for a linear, or actually we'll start with the table by types. So if I select this, it's going to group all of the components. So you can see we've got all of our bolts. We've got the bearing. If we have multiple bearings, they'll also be stacked here. Individual components and the sub-assembly, all in that same view. So we can have multiple views here. So I can either generate a 2D drawing straight away, or I can just say finish. And it's going to give me my representations in the side window. And we've got the table by types top one, which is the default name for that view. We then go back to explode. I'll show you a different one now. So this time we're going to go for the linear explode. You can choose to select certain parts or components that you want to be in the explosion. If you don't select anything, by default, it will select all of the components for me. Again, I'm at top level explosion here, so it's not going to explode the sub-assembly, and I'll show you what we can do about that in a second as well. So the first thing I want to do then is use the Z axes. It'll take a few seconds, and now it allows me to move my cursor and stretch this out, or I can put a dimension in the box and it'll snap to that automatically. So I'm just going to click there and say I'm happy with that. I might just say finish. So now we've got two exploded views. If we double click on the first one, that'll activate and we can see it on our screen. You can now make changes and then save those changes if you want. So if you want to manually move one of these components, you can do that and then save it and it will update the views. Or we can just say save and not make any changes. Same with the linear explode, double click and there it is in the screen. And again, you can make modifications, but here now we've got step by step because we've got multiple parts being exploded. And if you double click on each of these, it activates that step. So you can see as it gets blown apart, it'll show you step by step there. This is useful now. So if we go back to step one, we can actually animate the explosion. And obviously you can use that in an animation as well if you want to. So if we're happy with that, we'll just save that change as well. Next one we want to look at then is in the exploded view. And we can go for automatic. Now, automatic will, as I say, look at the orientation of the components and also the constraints that are holding it in position and use those that information to produce the path that it wants to extrude along. If we go to automatic, we can then choose either to enable the follow leaders, which we'll put in later. And when it comes to the gap it leaves between the components, you've got a choice here on auto, which is basically going to look at the view that you've got and also the orientation of the view, and it'll explode so that all of the components can be seen. If you want to use the current projection for the gap, then it's basically going to look at the space that I've got inside of the area and the orientation of my component, and then it will maximize the explosion so we can see all the components. I'm just going to go with auto for now. And then there we have the automatic explosion. Because we set the settings to the top rather, it's only going to explode, as I say, the single components and not the sub-assembly. Now that may be fine. You may want to put that into a drawing and then do a separate explode of the sub-assembly. So just to show you what happens if you do that, because obviously we don't want all of the other components to be in that explosion, we only want the sub-assembly to be in the explosion this time. So this time when we go to our explode, we're going to go to our settings and then we're going to choose bottom. So it's going to select all of our components. I'm then just going to select the sub-assembly, hit OK. I'll finish there. Let's made a slight mistake there. I forgot to actually explode it. What we can do, we'll do that. So I'm going to go to my explosion. Make sure we set the bottom. Select our assembly. Like this. See when things are live, because it makes mistakes. Let's do that. Give it a few seconds to refresh. And there we've got the sub-assembly exploded. Now, because I selected the sub-assembly before I gave it the commands to explode automatically, it will now turn off the visibility of the components that weren't selected. So we only have the explosion of the sub-assembly, which is very, very useful now. So when we go to our automated, we've got the top level assembly with the sub-assembly not exploded. If we go to the second automatic explosion, we've now got the sub-assembly exploded without the main assembly. So you can now do multiple views in your drawing so you can see all of the parts quite clearly. And obviously we could explode the entire thing automatically, including all of the sub-assemblies, but it will end up making the drawing look a little bit busy, especially when you're trying to annotate. And just to show you the difference now, if we go to our settings and we choose the bottom level and we go for our automatic explode, it will now explode all of the components, including the sub-assembly. Take a few seconds just to update, and then we can finish that. So we could use that if we wanted to, but as I say, if you're doing the ballooning and bill of materials and item numbers, etc., that might get a little bit busy in your drawing, but it shows the availability that you can have there. Start those changes. So next thing I want to do is actually put this into a drawing. So how do we do that? We can simply right click on each of these and generate our view, which will go straight into our drawing. Before we do that though, there's a couple of things we need to just show you. So if I just come back to one of my automated, or we'll do the linear explode. Now these steps, as you can see, if I move my view around just manually and then I double click on a step, it automatically changes the view back. That's because each of these steps has a camera angle assigned to it. And this is obviously so when you do an animation, you can move from one step to the other and actually spin the object around, zoom in, zoom out, whatever you want to do. And just to show you how that works, if we go to step 0, and we've got the default view that's selected here. If I use the view control at the top here, and I move it to that position, so we've got top, back, left, I can then right click on the step and say update the camera view. So that camera view will always be on step 0. So if I go back to step 1, it goes back to the original view. Step 0, the view we just created. If we want that view for all of these steps, we can select at the very top level, right click, and tell it to set this camera view for all of the default steps. Now, these views are being produced. So if I now save this block as another block, another DWG, it will automatically use the camera view that you've assigned in these steps that you're exporting. What it doesn't do is use that camera view when you produce your 2D drawing. So one thing to be very, very aware of, if we just save the change we've made there, if I select my linear top, which we've just been working on, and I want to have an isometric view, the view that is placed in the 2D drawing is the view that is on the screen when I select it to export it. And just to show you that, I'm going to right click on here and say generate views. It's going to ask me which steps I want to export. So I'm just going to select all of the steps. So we get the complete explosion. And the drawing I want to put it on is on my A0 drawing. So I'm just going to right click to accept that. This gives me the view. I can place it down on the drawing sheet. You can do multiple views from here, but I'm just going to stick with the one view. Takes a few seconds to render. And then it's going to give me 2D drawing in my view there. So if I now go back to my model, we've got the same linear explosion selected, and I move my view to another angle, and then I simply generate a new view from that. Again, it's going to look at the view that's on my screen, and that's the view that gets placed into the drawing. So this is quite an important thing. So if we are, as we are now, got no predefined views, if you have this drawing you're working on today, you come back in tomorrow and you want to add some more views, but because you've turned BricsCAD off and then back on again, this might be in a totally different or a default view. So you need to replicate the view that you placed originally. Now the chances of actually getting that at the exact angle that you've had on your previous views is practically 0. So how do we deal with this? Very, very simply. So what we can do is move the object or the assembly to the view that we want to use. We can then either go to our View tab, and then here we have views. So we can select that, and you've got all of your views that you're going to use. Or you can simply right click in open space, and we've got our view control there as well. So if I now open this and I create a new view, the window that I've got selected, and I'm going to give it a name of ISO 1. So now, if I move this around, and I go back to my view, I can select ISO 1, and you'll see that moves into the right area. So it's that actual view. So that's now a view that I can replicate. So again, when any of these views here, I can just simply right click on automatic 2, generate view, and it'll be the view they've got on the screen that is now repeatable, even if I want to move the component around. And that's going to come in very useful later on as well. Just going to delete some of these views, just to tidy things up a little bit. So we've now got a view in place here. What else can we do with it? Well, one thing we want to do is perhaps change the look of it and do some ballooning and put a parts list in as well. The view itself is by default a 2D drawing. If I want to change that, I can select the drawing border and go to my Properties tab. Down at the bottom here, we can choose whether the display is locked, so we can spin it around, pan, zoom, etc. I'll show you that a bit later on. But we can also change the geometry from 2D to 3D. So if we go on here, change that to 3D. You can then change the type of view that you've got. So we'll change that down to mechanical. And now, because we're in the 3D mode, we can double click inside here. And if the view isn't what we quite want, we can then rotate it exactly the same as you would in the 3D CAD area. One thing we do need to do though, at the moment, if I click on here again, you'll see it says display is locked. So we can't rotate it or move it. It's a bit of a safeguard, so you can't accidentally change the orientation of the exploded view. If I now change that to no, I can now double click inside this window and I can rotate the view to whatever angle I want. When I'm finished with that, I can simply come out of the view, select the window again, and then we'll change that back to 2D. Again, it's going to take a few seconds just to render that. And then we've got our 2D view that we had originally. So it's very, very flexible how you want to move all of these. I'm just going to come out of there, delete that view. So if we now go back to our model, and we've got our automatic top 2, which is our sub-assembly that's been exploded. What we might want to do is add some trail lines to that, or even edit it or modify it. While you've activated a step, you can simply come up to the top where it says assembly, go back to our explode, and you can either use the move or trailing lines command. The explode move is simply a manual way of moving components. You might want to stretch it out a little bit more or change the orientation of some of the components. I'm just going to go for the trail lines. And again, I'm just going to use the defaults, which is the entire model, and it puts on the trail lines form. I can now come back to my block editor, save the changes that I've made. And now when I come into my drawing area, generate that view and place it in my drawing. Again, we just wait for that to render. So now we can see we've got our trail lines on here as well. Now there is one thing to show you, sort of a workaround. Our trail lines are visible when we're in the 2D environment. So if I select this now and do what I did before, you might want a 3D rendered version of this. So I'm going to change that to 3D. And I'm just going to change the view to mechanical. As you'll see, the trail lines have now disappeared. They're not available when you're in the 3D mode. Now, there's a way around this. I don't like using the phrase too much, but it's sort of a workaround we can do for this. So we've got that view placed. And what we can now do is come back and we can place the same view again. So generate the views on the same drawing sheet. And what we're going to do is just go from the midpoint of that line. So we've got our snaps already working for us. So we can track that across. Like so. Again, that will render, take a few seconds. But then we can simply use the manipulator. We want to move that across and put one view on top of the other. Hit escape. We can now turn off the view of the border. And you'll see we've now got a rendered view with the trail lines on as well. So this is something that may be updated in later versions, and there may be other ways of doing this, but I found this is quite an efficient way. And it also means we really must set that view so we can have the same view on top of another view. So there'd be nothing worse than if we come in here and we've accidentally knocked my 3D mouse. The chances of getting that view to be perfectly matched up again, it just wouldn't happen. So no matter where we are now, if we want that view back, we can simply go back to our views, click on the ISO 1, reorientates the model, and we've got the view exactly as we wanted it. So hopefully you can see the benefit of that. So as with all of these views, you can export them to another drawing. So simple case of coming into the view, double click to edit, and then you can just use save block as. You can give it existing block name, or you can just create a new one. So called T5. Go to the defaults here, save all the definitions, yes, and now let's save the block for me automatically on my local drive. Open that one up later on, perhaps in a bit time. So you can use that in multiple ways, but the key thing there is understanding that the views are associated with the export only, not to the 2D drawing. So back in the 2D drawing, look, that helps. So we've got our views there that we just had. What I might want to do is actually just take that out, and we're just going to put a fresh view in there so I can just concentrate on the bill of materials and the ballooning. So again, very quick and easy just to change this. We can come in here, generate our view, and place it in the middle. When it comes to doing the parts list and the bill of materials, again, very, very easy to do. Come in here, I'm just going to turn off the visibility of my border because I don't want that anymore. And I'm just going to go to my annotate tab. So before we put the balloons in, the first thing we must have is the parts list or the bill of materials. So I'm simply going to click on here, place it top right of my drawing, and also I'm just going to change the color there, just make it a little bit easier to be seen. So that gives us our parts list. The parts list can be edited in the properties as before. So you can choose the direction of the components, the size of the, but it shows all of the parts, some of the parts, sub-assemblies, top level, etc. Now we've got that though, we can go back to our bill of materials area and we use the drop down and we can either balloon single components or we can say auto balloon. This gives us some options. So we can select another table. So if you have multiple tables in here with different part breakdowns, you can select different ones. You can select your balloon style. These are all changeable in your template files as well. And you can do placement mode and number mode. So the placement mode, we select that. We want to either select all of the components or just unique components. Now, again, this can make quite a difference on the clarity of the drawing. If we went for all and we've got 4 bolts, you're going to have the a leader coming off of each of those bolts. So it can look very, very busy. If we go for unique, it would just say one of the bolts and it'll understand that the others are the same, but you don't need to balloon them. So I'm just going to go for unique. Select the area or the view that we want to balloon. So we click inside the view, and then we can choose the orientation. So we can either have a circular explosion of balloons, or we can have a rectangle or a square. If we go with the default, it just gives you polyline, so we can come across here and down. Now it's only got found one unique component in there because I've got the other parts probably not being seen in the bill of materials, so they're just reference only. But you can see how it understands that. So if we want to get the entire model in now, and we'll just see how it all works. Just get rid of all these. Okay. So if we go now for our complete explosion, you can now generate the view of that. Again, we've got on our A0 template and place it in the middle. Not going to change anything else there, so we're going to go straight to our bill of materials. Just wait for that to finish rendering. And again, we'll place that in the top corner. Just change the color. So now go to our balloons. We're going to automatically balloon everything that is in that view. And then once that's selected everything, we can then place our balloons around the edge. So now, hopefully you can see what I meant about the drawing looking very busy. If you do a complete explosion, that's probably worth doing certain areas. So that's now ballooned up every single component in our assembly. So you can see we've got multiples of all the components there that we're working with. We probably don't want that, but again, you can change that now to just do unique components and update the bill of materials and the parts list automatically. That's a start for looking at exploded views. There are other little tips and tricks that we will be coming up with, and I'll send you updates of anything that changes in future versions. Hopefully you found that useful. It's going through a lot of stuff. I've had to go quite quickly to get it into the time that we've got. If you have any questions or you want some information or demonstrations of particular areas that I may have covered, by all means drop me a line and I will pass an email back to you with either a screen recording or an explanation or even another webinar if necessary. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much.